Greetings, friends, and welcome to a new segment that I'm going to be doing on my channel. I'm going to be taking a look at the Rush discography. And what I'm going to be doing is, rather than going through it one record at a time, or to attempt to do the whole thing in one shot, which would be crazy, I'm going to be doing this in segments of 2 albums at a time. And the reason why is because I have kind of a theory behind some of these records. The whole segment is going to be called Rush Catalog, Attempt to Realization. Because I have a theory, and I'm sure that this theory can be put to many other bands as well. But for some reason, this seems to work so well with the Rush catalog. So let me explain. Excuse me. I've been singing, so my throat's a little wonky. Rush has a habit of making albums in 2s. And what they seem to do is they'll make a record, start with an idea in mind. It'll get close to what they envisioned that they wanted the final product to be. They'll release it. They'll say, oh, you know, this and that. We tried this and that, some new things, and we were close to it, but we never got to what we wanted. The next record they would do would be the realization of that vision, and they'll sort of nail it and give you the record that they originally had attempted. And this seems to have happened throughout their whole career. So we're going to start from the very top with the 2 records, which is the Rush debut record. Sorry for the glare, I'll take it out after. Rush first album, and of course their follow-up, Fly By Night. So, the debut record, released March 1st, 1974, recorded at Eastern Sound Studios in Toronto and Toronto Sound Studios, where it actually got mixed and remixed by Terry Brown, because he thought the original mix for the record was absolutely horrendous, so he pretty much saved that first album. So let's look at the first record really quickly. Basically, it's straight up bar rock. Led Zeppelin influenced, very, hard rock of the time. The early 70s, Led Zeppelin was huge. That type of rock and roll is what got Geddy and Alex really inspired. They loved it. They were playing all over in the bars. But what's interesting around this time is when they first started playing, they were relegated a lot to high school gyms, community centers. Why? Because back then they were still about the age of 18, 19, and the legal drinking age in Ontario and here in Canada was 21. So they couldn't play in any bars until, I believe, either 72 or 73, somewhere around there. They had changed the drinking age and dropped it to 18. Okay? So that opened up a whole new world for them. They could start playing bars, all the bars that they'd heard about and, attempted to sneak into when they were underage. They can now play their music at these bars. And back then, in the early 70s, there were tons and tons of bars. I'll put up a couple of little pictures of some early advertisements for some of their shows. And they were playing these clubs at will. And, a lot of these bars were open for bands to come and play because they needed acts all the time. So they really honed their skills during this time. And the music on the first album pretty much reflects that time. They were very, like I said, very Zeppelin inspired. And to be truthful, they also kind of were limited because of John Rutsey, their drummer. He was great. He's a fantastic drummer, suited this music unbelievably. But already back then, Geddy and Alex were very much influenced by a lot of the British bands overseas and a lot of these sort of progressive rock bands like Yes, King Crimson, Budgie, and all these other bands that they were very much inspired by, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and they had these elements in them, and they wanted to put them out into their songwriting as well. And found that they couldn't really do it with the guy that they had behind the drum kit at that time. But that was not a big issue. Their music was strong enough for them to get a record deal. Through their manager, Ray Daniels, he helped hook them up with Cliff Bernstein, with Mercury Records, and lo and behold, we have this album released. Now, just let me take this out. I'm sick of the glare already. There you go. Now, what's interesting is at the bottom already here it says, special thanks to Donna Helper of WMMS in Cleveland for getting the ball rolling. She helped them break the US market, and back then, if you were a Canadian band that hoped to make any sort of career out of this, you had better pray for breaking into the United States, because Canadian radio was very limited, very hard to get into at that time, believe it or not. Because I don't think the CRTC back at the time had their rules in place yet for having a certain amount of Canadian content played. I'm not 100% certain about that. I should have probably looked that up, but it's not really crucial to this part of my discussion. But the vision for this album was very much to make a hard rock record that reflected their time in the bar scene. And in the back of their minds here, they also kind of had a little vision of maybe throwing in some more progressive elements in it, which appear on only really one song. I think they actually were able to capture a bit of that. I mean, they had a long song, which is Here Again, at the end of side 1 there, yeah, which is 7 minutes 30 seconds. And the song Before and After, the second last song on the album, has a sort of progressively influenced introduction, which is just mainly on the guitar and bass and just some simple drumming. But the way they kind of structured that, you can already see little hints of the progressive wanting to come out into their music. So they go out, they start touring, they find out John Rutsey can't hack the touring because of his diabetes. So out comes John Rutsey, in comes Neil Peart, and they start touring. They find that they're a band that has jumped up 17-fold in terms of skills and how their music sounds. Neil's a much different drummer, much more, flashier, can do a lot of things, can play odd time signatures. So now the door is swung wide open to be able to do their new elements into their music. So they start writing, they go into the studio, and with Terry Brown's help, they record what, in my opinion, is my favorite Rush record, and probably the best Rush record I think they wrote, which is Fly By Night. Talk about a band that's inspired and on fire. I don't think they ever captured this type of performance, fire, again on a record. That's just my opinion. I could be, doesn't mean I'm right, You guys could disagree, obviously. This is a Canadian pressing of it, mastered by Gilbert Kong. Very, very nice pressing of this record. You can tell this is a reissue because it is not on the Mercury label. They are still with Mercury Records, obviously, at this time. But in Canada, they start releasing their material on their own label, Anthem Records. So, how does this record compare to their first record? Well, this is where my whole theory of attempt and realization comes in, where they attempted to see their vision through on the first record. They weren't able to, with the reasons that I mentioned earlier, but now with Neil Peart behind the kit, they were able to realize their vision. This is still a very hard rocking record with songs like Anthem, Best I Can, Beneath, Between and Behind, but then you start having songs like By Torn to Snow Dog, 8 minutes long, subdivided into 4 sections, lots of odd time signature parts. There's even a part I believe in there that's mentioned something. Let me just say it properly so I don't get egged for not mentioning it. Yeah, it's here. And By Torn to Snow Dog, it is subdivided into 4 parts, and I believe there's some part in there that's in an odd time signature. I believe it's like the battle part 3. There's like a 7/4 time part in there. So yeah, it's very interesting that they already start acknowledging these sorts of changes in their music right on their back cover even there. So side B, you have a lot of stuff also like Rivendell, which explores the kind of progressive stuff where they have the kind of fantasy lyrics, stuff like that, you know, very Jethro Tull kind of stuff, classical guitars and stuff like that. So this album is the realization of what they were hoping to do technically on their first record, make a hard rock record with some prog elements. That record, Fly By Night, has captured that vision, and it appears perfectly on the record. I mean, and not only did fans agree with that, surprisingly enough, the media in Canada agreed. They won a Juno on this release as Best New Canadian Band. So they agreed that they were up and coming and making a big noise on the scene. And like I said, this is a record that I'll never get sick of listening to. And everything about this record is a step up from the first one. And you'll see this sort of pattern happen as we talk about the next 2 records. And then the next 2 records, we're not going to talk about the live albums. They don't have nothing to do with this theory. But it'll be just studio records. But you'll see this theory come out perfectly. And you will notice this pattern works out very well up until the very end, but we have a long way to go till we get to that. But here we have The Attempt, Rush album number 1, The Realization, album number 2, Fly By Night. So that's my look at the first 2 records. If you have any comments to add about either one of these records, when did you actually hear any of these records, or what are your opinions on these records? Feel free to leave a comment, and I'll come back with record 3 and 4 next, which is Crest of Steel and 2112, and we'll see how The Attempt and Realization effect works on those 2 records. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and have a great day, and I'll speak to you all very soon. Bye for now.